The morning mist clung to the ancient pines like gossamer veils, turning the Montana wilderness into a realm of secrets and shadows. Through this ethereal landscape moved a figure with practiced stealth, James Hawthorne, known simply as Hawk to the few who crossed his path. 20 years of tracking and survival had taught him to read the forest like a well-worn book, but today something was different. The signs were wrong. Hawk crouched beside a fallen log, his weathered fingers tracing unusual markings in the soil. No animal he knew made prints like these. Too precise, too geometric, as if drawn with mathematical perfection. His instincts, honed by years of solitude, screamed that he wasn't alone. The forest's usual symphony of birdsong and rustling leaves had fallen silent, replaced by an unnatural stillness that made the hair on his neck stand on end. The first unusual sign had appeared 3 days ago, a strange, iridescent material caught on a thorny bush that seemed to change color when he touched it. Then came the unexplained lights in the night sky, moving against the wind in ways that defied explanation. Now these tracks, leading deeper into the old-growth forest, where the trees grew so thick they blocked out the sun. Something crashed through the underbrush ahead, sending a flock of startled crows into the air. Hawk's hand instinctively moved to the rifle slung across his back, but he didn't draw it. Not yet. Whatever was out there, it was injured. The pattern of movement spoke of desperation rather than aggression. He followed the trail with practiced ease, noting how the strange tracks became more erratic, veering from tree to tree, as if their maker was losing coordination. Blood marked the trail now, but it wasn't red. It gleamed with an otherworldly purple sheen that seemed to pulse in the filtered sunlight. The trail led to a small clearing, and there Hawk found her. She lay crumpled at the base of an ancient pine, her form both familiar and alien at the same time. She appeared human at first glance. 2 arms, 2 legs, a face that might have been beautiful by any standard. But her skin had a translucent quality that shifted like the northern lights, and her hair moved of its own accord as if suspended in water. She wore what looked like a suit of living metal that rippled and adjusted itself around a nasty wound in her side. Her eyes opened as he approached. They were entirely silver, with no pupils or iris, yet somehow conveyed a depth of intelligence and fear that was unmistakably conscious. She tried to move, to retreat further against the tree, but the wound in her side prevented her escape. "Easy," Hawk said softly, raising his empty hands. "I'm not going to hurt you." She responded with a series of musical tones that seemed to resonate in his chest rather than his ears. Her silver eyes never left his face as she pressed one hand against her injury. The living metal of her suit pulsed weakly around the wound, trying and failing to seal it. Hawk had spent enough time tracking wounded animals to recognize when one was about to give up. The fight was leaving her eyes, replaced by a resigned acceptance that made his chest tighten unexpectedly. Whatever she was, wherever she'd come from, she didn't deserve to die alone in these woods. He took a careful step forward, then another. She watched him approach but made no further attempt to flee. When he knelt beside her, she released a sound like wind through crystal, perhaps a laugh, perhaps a sigh of surrender. "Let me help," he said, knowing she couldn't understand the words but hoping his tone would convey his intent. He reached slowly toward her wound, giving her time to stop him if she wished. She didn't. The injury was unlike anything he'd ever seen, a perfect circular hole that seemed to have been burned through both her suit and flesh. The edges glowed faintly, and the purple blood that seeped from it was warm to the touch, but left no residue on his fingers. She studied his face as he examined the wound, her head tilted slightly as if trying to solve a puzzle. Then, with movements that spoke of great effort, she raised her hand and pressed 2 fingers against his temple. The world exploded into color and sensation. Images flooded his mind. A vast ship moving between the stars, a mission to study Earth's wildlife, a catastrophic malfunction, an emergency landing gone wrong. He saw through her eyes as she fled from something in orbit, felt her fear and determination as she sought somewhere to hide. When the connection broke, Hawk found himself gasping, overwhelmed by the intensity of the experience. She, Mira, he now knew her name was Mira, watched him with those impossible silver eyes, waiting to see what he would do with this knowledge. He should report this. Every government agency would want to know about an alien crash landing in the Montana wilderness. The rational part of his mind listed all the reasons he should walk away right now and call someone better equipped to handle this situation. Instead, he found himself shrugging off his pack and pulling out his first aid kit. It wasn't equipped to handle alien physiology, but some principles were universal. Stop the bleeding, prevent infection, promote healing. As he worked, Mira's expression shifted from resignation to confusion to something that might have been hope. "I know a place," he said as he finished bandaging her wound. "An old cabin, off the grid. No one else knows about it." He met her silver gaze. "You'll be safe there until you heal." Through their brief mental connection, she had learned enough English to understand his meaning. Her response came as both words and musical tones. "Why help me?" Hawk considered the question as he gathered his supplies. Why indeed? He had spent 2 decades avoiding human connection, retreating to the wilderness because animals made more sense than people. Yet here he was, offering sanctuary to a being from another world. "Because you need it," he said finally, "and because sometimes the right thing to do isn't the sensible thing to do." He helped her to her feet, supporting her weight as she swayed unsteadily. The living metal of her suit adjusted to accommodate his grip, warm and slightly yielding beneath his hands. As they began their slow journey through the forest, Hawk couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just changed irrevocably. Above them, something bright moved across the sky, searching. Mira's grip on his shoulder tightened, and he instinctively led her deeper into the shadows of the forest. Whatever was hunting her would have to go through him first, a thought that should have troubled him more than it did. The morning mist still clung to the pines, but now it felt less like a veil and more like a shield, hiding them from unfriendly eyes above. With each step they took deeper into his wilderness, Hawk felt the weight of his decision, settling around him like a comfortable coat. He had spent his life learning to read signs in the forest. Perhaps this was just another sign, pointing him toward something he hadn't known he was looking for. Mira's musical voice broke into his thoughts, the English words carefully formed. "Thank you, Hawk." He adjusted his grip on her waist, careful of her injury. "Don't thank me yet. We've still got a long way to go." The double meaning wasn't lost on either of them as they made their way through the ancient forest. 2 beings from different worlds, bound together by circumstance and choices that would echo across the stars. The cabin stood like a fortress of solitude against the gathering dusk, its weathered logs blending seamlessly with the surrounding forest. Inside, Hawk tended the wood stove while Mira sat wrapped in one of his old quilts, her silvery eyes reflecting the dancing flames. 3 days had passed since he found her in the woods, 3 days of cautious observation and halting attempts at communication. Her wound was healing at an astonishing rate, the living metal of her suit working in harmony with her body's natural regeneration. But it was her mind that fascinated him most. The way she absorbed English with incredible speed, how she studied everything in his cabin with an intensity that spoke of deep scientific training. "Your world," she said, her musical voice growing more confident with each passing hour. "It is so raw." She gestured to the wooden walls, the handmade furniture, the lack of technology. "My people would consider this primitive. Yet I find it." She paused, searching for the right word. "Peaceful." Hawk added another log to the fire, watching the sparks rise up the chimney. "Most humans would agree with your people. Not many choose to live this way anymore." He settled into his chair across from her, noting how the firelight played across her ethereal features. "Why were you really here, Mira? Before whatever happened that made you crash?" She was quiet for a long moment, her hair moving like liquid silver in the dim light. "My mission was to assess Earth's readiness for contact, to determine if your species had evolved enough to join the greater galactic community." Her eyes met his, filled with an ancient wisdom that made him feel young and inexperienced. We have been watching your kind for a very long time. And what's the verdict? He kept his voice neutral, though his heart raced at the implications of her words. Complicated. She pulled the quilt tighter around her shoulders. Your species is capable of great destruction, but also remarkable compassion. You wage wars over imaginary lines in the sand, yet risk your lives to save strangers. You are, she smiled slightly, paradoxical, says the alien who's currently hiding in a human's cabin, Hawk pointed out, earning another of those musical laughs that seemed to resonate in his bones. Indeed, I am breaking numerous protocols by being here. Her expression grew serious. The ones pursuing me, they are not my people. They are scavengers. They detected my ship's malfunction and saw an opportunity to acquire advanced technology. If they find me, they won't, Hawk said with a conviction that surprised them both. This forest has hidden me for 20 years. It can hide you too. Mira stood, letting the quilt fall away. In the firelight, her suit rippled like liquid mercury, adapting to her movements. She crossed to the cabin's single window, staring up at the stars visible through the trees. You don't understand what you're risking, Hawk. If they trace me here, they won't show mercy. Your life, your world, everything could change. He joined her at the window, close enough to feel the strange energy that seemed to emanate from her being. Maybe some things need to change. She turned to face him, and for a moment neither spoke. The distance between them seemed both vast as space and insignificant as a heartbeat. Mira raised her hand, hesitating before gently touching his face. The connection bloomed between them instantly, not the overwhelming flood of their first contact, but a gentle sharing of thoughts and feelings. He saw her whirl through her memories, crystalline cities that sang with their own frequencies, ships that grew like living things, a civilization so advanced it bordered on magical. But he also felt her loneliness, the burden of being an observer, never a participant in the world she studied. In return, she experienced his solitude, the peace he'd found in the wilderness, the way he read the forest's moods and movements. She felt his growing fascination with her, untainted by fear or scientific curiosity. He simply accepted her as she was. The connection broke naturally, leaving them both breathing heavily. Mira's silver eyes were wide with wonder. You are not what I expected, Hawk. Neither are you. He smiled slightly. So what happens now? Before she could answer, a high-pitched whine filled the air. Mira stiffened, her suit rippling with alarm. Through the window, they saw lights moving through the trees, not the warm glow of flashlights, but the cold, piercing beams of advanced technology. They found me, Mira whispered, her voice tight with fear. Hawk, you must let me go. I can lead them away from here. Instead of responding, Hawk moved quickly through the cabin, gathering supplies with practiced efficiency. Food, water, medical kit, his rifle. There's a network of caves 3 miles north. We can lose them in the tunnels. She caught his arm. This is not your fight. He met her gaze steadily. You said humans are paradoxical. Well, here's another paradox for your research. Sometimes the most logical choice is to defy logic completely. The lights were getting closer. Mira's suit shimmed, adapting to match the darkness outside. You're either very brave or very foolish. Probably both. He shouldered his pack and checked his rifle. Ready? She nodded, and together they slipped out the cabin's back door into the waiting forest. As they moved through the darkness, Hawk realized that for the first time in 20 years, he wasn't running away from something. He was running toward something. Something that defied explanation or rational thought. The stars wheeled overhead, ancient and unchanging, as two beings from different worlds disappeared into the shadows of the ancient forest, their destinies now inexorably intertwined. The cave system stretched beneath the mountains like a stone labyrinth, its winding passages offering both sanctuary and peril. Hawk and Mira crouched in a narrow tunnel, their breaths mingling in the cold underground air. The pursuit had lasted through the night, their hunters proving more tenacious than either had anticipated. "They're using quantum trackers," Mira whispered, her suit dimming to match the cave's darkness. "They can follow my energy signature unless—" She hesitated, her silver eyes finding his in the gloom. "Unless what?" Hawk asked, keeping his voice low. Water dripped somewhere in the darkness, a steady rhythm that matched his heartbeat. "I could shut down my suit completely. It would mask my signature, but—" She swallowed hard. "The suit helps maintain my molecular stability in Earth's atmosphere. Without it, I would be vulnerable." Hawk studied her face, reading the fear she tried to hide. "How vulnerable?" "I would appear human, but my body would be weakened. If they found us—" She left the thought unfinished. Above them, something hummed, a sound too perfect to be natural. They pressed deeper into the shadow of a rock outcropping as a beam of cold light swept through the tunnel. Hawk instinctively pulled Mira closer, feeling her tremble slightly against him. "Do it," he whispered into her hair. "I'll protect you." She looked up at him, searching his face for any sign of doubt. Finding none, she nodded. "It will take a few moments. Stay close." The living metal of her suit began to ripple, its mercury-like surface breaking down into thousands of tiny particles that seemed to sink into her skin. As the transformation progressed, her otherworldly appearance faded, the silver of her eyes softening to a stormy gray, her shifting hair settling into waves of pale blonde. The ethereal glow that had surrounded her dimmed until she appeared entirely human. The change left her gasping, her newly human form shivering in the cave's chill air. Hawk quickly shrugged off his jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders. She felt fragile in his arms, yet there was still an unmistakable strength in the way she held herself. "I feel," she breathed, "everything." So intensely, her fingers clutched his shirt. "How do you humans bear it?" "We manage," he said softly, rubbing warmth back into her arms. "Can you walk?" She nodded, though her legs trembled as she stood. They began moving deeper into the cave system, Hawk's years of exploring these tunnels guiding them through the darkness. The sounds of pursuit grew fainter, but neither dared hope they'd lost their hunters entirely. "There's a chamber ahead," Hawk whispered. "Underground spring, multiple exits. We can rest there, figure out our next move." They had just reached the chamber when Mira stumbled, her newfound human limitations catching up with her. Hawk caught her before she could fall, guiding her to sit against a smooth rock wall. In the faint light filtering through cracks in the ceiling, she looked simultaneously more vulnerable and more beautiful than ever. "I never expected this," she said softly, looking at her now human hands. "When I came to study Earth, I thought I understood what it meant to be human. But this—" She met his gaze. "Everything is different. Every sensation, every emotion." Hawk sat beside her, close enough to share warmth. "Different good or different bad?" "Both." "Neither." She smiled slightly. Another paradox. Her hand found his in the darkness. "I feel fear more sharply than ever. But also—" She trailed off, her fingers intertwining with his. The air between them seemed to charge with electricity. Hawk turned to face her, his free hand moving to cup her cheek. She leaned into his touch, her eyes fluttering closed. The moment stretched between them, fragile as spider silk and just as precious. Then Mira's eyes snapped open, fear replacing tenderness. "They're coming," she whispered. "They're close." As if in response, a harsh light flooded the chamber. 3 figures stood at one of the entrances, their forms obscured by sleek environmental suits that seemed to absorb the darkness around them. The leader stepped forward, its helmet retracting to reveal a face that was almost human but wrong in subtle, disturbing ways. "The specimen will come with us," it said in a voice like grinding metal. "The human will be disposed of." Hawk moved in front of Mira, his rifle raised. "Neither of those things is going to happen." The creature's lips twisted in what might have been amusement. "Your primitive weapon cannot harm us. Stand aside, and we will make your death quick." "Hawk," Mira whispered behind him, her voice trembling. Please don't. He cut her off. 20 years ago, I came to these mountains because I thought I was running away from something. Turns out I was running towards something instead. He chambered around. I'm done running. The leader raised a weapon that hummed with deadly energy. Then you will die. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. As the alien hunter fired, Mira surged forward, her human form blazing with sudden light. Her suit erupted from beneath her skin, not just covering her but expanding, forming a shield that deflected the energy blast. The force of it sent both her and Hawk tumbling backward into darkness as the cave ceiling began to collapse. They fell through space, surrounded by falling rock and crackling energy, Mira's suit encompassing them both in a protective cocoon. The last thing Hawk heard before impact was Mira's voice in his mind. I won't let you die for me. Then darkness claimed them both, and the mountain swallowed their fall into its depths. Consciousness returned to Hawk slowly, accompanied by the soft hum of unfamiliar technology. He lay on a surface that seemed to shift and adjust to his every movement, cradling his body in perfect comfort. When he opened his eyes, he found himself in a chamber that defied earthly architecture. Walls that curved organically, surfaces that pulsed with gentle bioluminescence. You're safe, Mira's voice came from somewhere nearby. We're in a recovery pod, deep within the mountain. He turned his head to find her sitting beside him. Back in her natural form, silver eyes bright with concern. Her suit rippled with complex patterns that seemed to reflect her emotional state. How long was I out? Several hours. The fall would have killed us both if... She hesitated. If my people hadn't found us first. That brought Hawk fully awake. Your people? As if in response, a section of the wall dissolved, revealing a larger chamber beyond. 3 figures entered, tall, ethereal beings similar to Mira, but with an authority that seemed to fill the space around them. Their suits were more elaborate, shifting with colors Hawk's human eyes could barely comprehend. James Hawthorne, the central figure, spoke, its voice a harmony of tones that somehow formed English words. I am Elder Varen. We owe you a debt for protecting our scientist. Hawk sat up slowly, noting that his injuries from the fall had been completely healed. Those hunters have been dealt with, another of the elders said. Their kind has long violated our laws regarding interference with developing worlds. They will trouble Earth no more. Then it's over. Hawk looked at Mira, but her expression was unreadable. Not quite, Elder Varen said. There is still the matter of contamination. You have been exposed to knowledge and technology far beyond your world's current development. Protocol dictates that such exposure must be corrected. Hawk's blood ran cold. You're going to erase my memories. It is necessary, the third elder stated, for the protection of both our peoples. Mira stood suddenly, her suit flaring with emotion. Elders, please. He saved my life. More than that, he showed me something vital about humanity, something that could change everything we thought we knew about their readiness for contact. Mira, Elder Varen's voice held warning. You know the protocols. The protocols are wrong. Her outburst seemed to surprise even her. She composed herself before continuing. What I learned from Hawk, the depth of human compassion, their capacity for acceptance and sacrifice, it proves they're ready. They're more ready than we ever imagined. Hawk rose to stand beside her, ignoring the disapproving looks from the elders. I won't forget, he said firmly. You can try to take these memories, but what I feel. He looked at Mira. That's not something you can erase. The elders conferred silently, their suits shifting in complex patterns. Finally, Elder Varen spoke. There is an alternative, but it requires sacrifice. What kind of sacrifice? Mira asked, though her tone suggested she already knew. You could stay, Mira. Renounce your position. Accept life as a human. We would adjust your biology permanently. No more suit, no more connection to our technology. You would age as they age, live as they live, die as they die. The chamber fell silent. Hawk wanted to speak, to tell her not to give up everything for him. But the words wouldn't come. This had to be her choice. Mira's silver eyes met his, and suddenly they were connected again, sharing thoughts and feelings without words. He felt her fear of losing herself, her excitement at the possibility of truly experiencing human life, her deep and growing love for him. In return, he showed her the life they could have, the peace of the forest, the joy of discovery, the simple beauty of growing old together. "If I choose this," she said aloud, "what happens to the observation mission, to the possibility of contact?" "Others will continue your work," Elder Varen said. "Your research, combined with your personal experience, will help inform our future decisions regarding Earth. But you must choose now." Mira looked down at her suit, watching it shimmer one last time. Then she reached for Hawk's hand, intertwining their fingers. "I choose him. I choose Earth." The elders moved forward as one, their suits extending tendrils of living metal that surrounded Mira in a cocoon of light. Hawk held her hand tightly as her form began to change, the otherworldly glow fading, her silver eyes darkening to stormy gray, her living suit dissolving into her skin one final time. When the transformation was complete, she stood before him fully human, beautiful in an entirely new way. Her eyes were wet with tears, her first real tears, as she touched her now permanent human form. "It is done," Elder Varen announced. "Mira, you are now as human as Earth herself. May you find joy in your choice." The elder turned to Hawk. "Take care of her. She has given up the stars for you." "No," Mira said softly, still holding Hawk's hand. "I haven't given up the stars. I've just chosen to view them from a different perspective." The elders departed as silently as they had come, their chamber dissolving back into the mountain, as if it had never existed. Hawk and Mira were left alone in a natural cave, a shaft of sunlight breaking through from above. "Are you sure?" Hawk asked, touching her face gently. "About all of this?" Mira smiled, leaning into his touch. "I spent my life observing humanity from a distance. Now I get to experience it fully, with someone who showed me its true beauty." She pressed closer to him. "I'm sure." Spring came to the Montana wilderness in gentle waves of green, transforming the forest where Hawk's cabin stood. The year had passed since Mira chose to become human, and the changes in their lives had unfolded like the seasons themselves. Naturally, inevitably, beautifully. The morning sun found them on the cabin's porch, sharing coffee as they watched deer graze in the distant meadow. Mira's now human form had adapted to Earth life with remarkable grace. Her hair, once liquid silver, now caught the sunlight in strands of pale gold. Her eyes, though no longer otherworldly, held the same depth of wisdom and wonder that had first captured Hawk's heart. "Miss it sometimes?" Hawk asked, watching her gaze drift to the sky, where stars still lingered in the fading dawn. Mira considered the question, cupping her coffee mug in both hands. "I miss certain things," she admitted. "The connection to the living technology, the ability to travel between stars." She turned to him with a smile. "But I've gained so much more. Every sensation is extraordinary. The warmth of the sun, the taste of coffee, the sound of rain on the roof, it's all so vivid, so real." Hawk reached over and took her hand, still marveling at how perfectly it fit in his. "You've changed me too, you know. Before you, I thought I needed solitude to find peace. Now I understand that peace can be found in connection." Their quiet moment was interrupted by a familiar sound, the deep resonance of ships entering the atmosphere. They stood together, watching as 3 vessels descended through the clouds, their organic forms glowing softly in the morning light. Unlike the hostile hunters from a year ago, these visitors were expected. "Right on schedule," Mira said softly. "The first official delegation." In the months following Mira's transformation, her research had proven instrumental in changing her people's approach to Earth contact. Her experience, choosing to become human, finding love across the stars, had demonstrated humanity's potential in ways no scientific observation could have revealed. The ships landed in the meadow, sending the deer scattering into the trees. As their hulls settled into the spring grass, Hawk squeezed Mira's hand. "Ready?" She nodded, and together they walked down from the porch. Elder Varen emerged from the central ship, accompanied by a group of human officials, the carefully selected representatives who would begin the delicate process of establishing formal contact between Earth and Mira's people. "Mira." Elder Varen greeted her with a gentle incline of their head. "Your sacrifice has borne remarkable fruit. Thanks to your insights, we have revised our entire approach to emerging civilizations." One of the human officials, a woman in a diplomatic uniform, stepped forward. "Ms. Mira, Mr. Hawthorne, your story has become something of a legend in certain circles, a testament to the possibility of bridging even the widest of gaps." Mira smiled, leaning slightly against Hawk. "We're just two people who found each other across an impossible distance. The rest." She gestured to the gathered officials and the ships behind them. "That's up to all of you." As the diplomats began their carefully choreographed meeting, Hawk and Mira slipped away from the crowd, walking hand in hand along a familiar forest trail. Above them, sunlight filtered through new spring leaves, creating patterns that danced across their skin. "Think they'll make it work?" Hawk asked, helping her over a fallen log. "Humans and your people." Mira paused at the crest of a small hill, looking back at the meadow where two civilizations were taking their first tentative steps toward understanding. "They'll face challenges, misunderstandings, moments of doubt. But yes, I think they'll make it work." She turned to him with a mischievous smile. "After all, we did." Hawk pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her hair, no longer starlight and metal, but wildflowers and morning dew. "We had an advantage. Love tends to make the impossible possible." "Another human paradox," she teased, wrapping her arms around his neck. "The best one," he murmured, and kissed her. In the meadow below, humanity took its first official steps into a larger universe. But here on their hillside, Hawk and Mira had already discovered the greatest truth of all: that love knows no boundaries, respects no protocols, and can transform even the stars themselves. As they walked back to their cabin, hand in hand, Mira looked up at the morning sky, where the stars were fading into daylight. She no longer felt like an observer of humanity. She had become part of its story, part of its endless capacity for growth and change and love. "Home?" Hawk asked, following her gaze. Mira squeezed his hand, feeling the solid warmth of his skin against hers. "Yes," she said softly. "I'm already there." Together they walked back to their cabin, leaving footprints side by side in the spring soil. One path, one future, forged from two worlds that had seemed impossibly far apart. Above them, the morning star winked once before fading into the blue, a final benediction for a love that had transcended the stars themselves.